If you're going through hard times and looking for a way out, it's important to know that life is not an Olympic figure skating event. There are no points for difficulty. You either stay stuck or get free. That's why you deserve to take the path of least resistance. Any voices telling you that's not allowed are not invested in your freedom. My name is John Oakes, and this is The Easy Way Out. Well, today I am joined by Shae McDonald, right?
Yes.
Shae has gone through an impressive weight loss transformation already, and she's still cranking away. So I'm really excited to get to talk to her and get to know her and get to know all about her 100-pound weight loss, which has happened in fairly short order. So yeah, Shae, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So apologies if my speech is affected in any way. I had a dental appointment rescheduled to this morning.
Oh,
And
goodness.
so until about 45 minutes ago, the left side of my palate was like swollen and completely numb. So
Oh my gosh.
I think I'm I think I'm okay, but that's my excuse. So Shae, can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm 31. I'm newly married as of 2020, or newly remarried. I've got two little girls that are 6 and 7. And one of the big reasons that I joined TikTok in the first place, they were talking about it. My little sister was talking about it, and it was 2020, so there's absolutely nothing to do. So I downloaded it, and of course, being a elder millennial, I was like, oh, there's no way I'm ever gonna learn these dances or put my life out there. And about 10 months in, I would say, I uploaded a video of myself not really posed, not really dressed well, not really doing anything in particular, but just so I would have like a side by side comparison at the end of the year, and it went viral, which was a huge shock to me because I thought my account was actually private. So after I died of the initial embarrassment, I realized there are a lot more people like me with bodies like mine than I originally thought. And in the fitness world, it's so hard to find people my size, and so it makes it feel that much more impossible. So once I got over the fact that like 30,000 people had seen me in like a bra and some short shorts, then I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this and turn it into something that can help others. So that's how I got started.
That's awesome. And are you in Texas? Is that right?
I am. I'm in Houston.
Okay. And then what do you do for work, if anything?
So up until December, I was actually working in telecommunications. Prior to that, I was a loan officer, and I never really had a sense of like what I wanted to do. From the time I graduated high school until December, I had probably 8 different career ideas and different light bulbs that would go off, and oh, this is my purpose. And then 6 months out, I would just be like, I actually hate this. This is the first career path in my life that I wake up excited, and I read my emails and I'm just like, oh my God, like even on my worst days, I can't quit because there's people who are starting from where I started at that need to see me finish this and need to know that it can be done. And so um, I don't know what I would call this career, but currently this is what I do full time between just views and sponsorships and things, and collaborating with different people locally and like hosting classes at like different fitness centers. So definitely not something I ever thought I would encounter as a career. Never really thought of myself as a fitness professional until very, very recently. But I guess, there's obviously a need for that representation, like I said, and I'm happy to provide it.
Wow, that's incredible. I definitely want to circle back around and learn more about what you're doing in that regard.
Sure.
Um, one question I ask my clients when I'm getting to know them, potentially taking them on, is just when their weight issues started. Was it in childhood? Was it later in life? Yeah, and were you an active kid? Did you do sports, or just what was that like?
I was. I've been an athlete as long as I can remember. I started playing soccer at 6, softball at 8, and then all throughout middle school and high school, I was either playing for whatever teams my school had or like different private leagues. I did everything from co-ed wrestling and earning a scholarship for that, to lacrosse. And the only thing I always joke and say I never did was basketball, because being short, chunky, and slow was just like three strikes against me. But everything else, if it was a ball, if it was a sport, if I could burn energy doing it and be on a team and like have that camaraderie, my hands were all over it.
So, what was your weight situation like in those days? You said you were chunky.
Yes, yes. So yeah, looking back, I don't ever remember being a healthy weight past like maybe age 5, if that. I definitely know by the time I started first grade, I was a little chunkster. And everyone around you always says, "Oh, well, she's so active, she'll lose the weight. It's just baby fat." Um, but I mean, a lot of it's still here, so I'm not so sure. Um, and I guess the juxtaposition of being an athlete and having broader shoulders and like carrying my weight more in my midsection, as opposed to like a lot of the girls that I would be on, various teams with, that were just naturally slender and lean and could eat whatever they wanted. It was really difficult. So as much as I loved being in the world of sports, it definitely did a lot to me mentally.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, I take it maybe after you left school and you didn't have sports, burning up calories, did things just kind of go south from there?
Absolutely. That freshman 15 was like a freshman 80 for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that it hits everybody differently, but I also, at that point in my life, I had moved across the country to be with my now ex-husband. So, spoiler alert, it did not end well. Um, and so, just being really isolated, not knowing anyone in a whole brand new state across the country, culture
Where was
shock.
this?
I moved from Houston, Texas to Wilmington, North Carolina. And so, not knowing anyone, not really having a support system, or even really just like an outlet at that point besides work. Um, you spend a lot of nights at home with pizza and ice cream because you're, 19, 20, 21, and it's just you against the world. You can do anything and eat anything with no repercussions. And before you know it, I had gotten up to, I think, 270. Um, and in retrospect, I just thought I was like the most massive beached whale that ever was. And now I'm like, God, I would kill to be 270 again.
Yeah, been there. And so, when did you reach your biggest?
So I got to rewind a bit. In summer of
Sure.
2020, I had COVID for the first time. My whole household had it. Myself, my husband, and our two daughters were 4 and 5 at the time. And it hit my 4-year-old and I the hardest. She ended up on a ventilator at the Texas Children's Hospital downtown.
Jeez.
And I couldn't even be with her because I was also sick and have a horrible immune system. So, um, not only was COVID attacking me, but just like the emotions of like, I failed my baby. I let her catch this big bad thing that everyone's afraid of and talking about, and feeling like just this terrible parent. She is fine. She's healthy. She's active. Both my kids are absolutely just precious and healthy as can be now. But fall of 2021, she and I both got it again. And so we both were diagnosed with long COVID and kind of dealing with like the repercussions of that. She was 5 at the time; she's 6 now, and just trying to navigate like how do you explain to a 5, almost 6-year old that they can't play like the other kids can, because she couldn't run, she couldn't keep up without an inhaler, and even if we did keep the inhaler on us, there was no guarantee she like wouldn't pass out. And so my main focus at that point was really just her. But that second time definitely hit us both pretty hard again. And then I actually got it a third time in December, so twice in about 90 days. And that third time just absolutely wrecked my immune system. And it was a really bizarre time because like the county was calling me and they were like, "Wow, you're the first person in Harris County or Houston per our records to have had it 3 times. Like, what does it feel like?" And I'm just like, "How did you get my number? Like, I feel like I'm dying, obviously." um, and so just having gone through that and being newly married, I ended up at my highest at 422 pounds, and I didn't even know that until after the third time I had COVID. I had a stroke from it, And so I'd been there for 3 days. I knew that they were going to discharge me that third day because they simply just needed the bed. They even told me, like, you're not really fit to go home, but we don't have a choice. And
Mm.
Houston's been a red zone pretty
Yikes.
much since the beginning, just because there's a lot of international travel. And so just preparing, like, what is life going to look like when I get home was kind of at the forefront of my mind. And I didn't even know it was a stroke. They couldn't even tell me what was wrong with me. The day that they walked in with my discharge papers, it was a doctor and like a college student that had been shadowing him. And he walks in and he hands me this pamphlet and he's like, "You can leave by 2 o'clock. Make sure you have somebody here to pick you up because you won't be able to drive." So I'm thinking, okay, maybe they just don't know what it is. And I'm flipping through this pamphlet he's given me, and it says stroke aftercare. Here's what to look for. Here's what to do if it happens again. And I'm like, I
Jeez.
didn't even know that I'd had a stroke. Can you kind of answer some questions I've got about this? And this doctor, this medical professional, looks at me in my face and goes, "Well, you're 400 freaking pounds. What did you expect?" Um, that was the first time I ever had heard that I was even over 400. I think between like just lockdown and having COVID multiple times and being newly married and enjoying our new family life and that aspect of things and date nights with my new husband, I didn't even realize. I had no idea. And so to find out that way in such a harsh and I feel like cruel manner really just, I don't know what effect he was going for, but I guarantee it did not come across that way. I was ashamed. I was mortified. I couldn't stop crying. Um, and to this day, people always ask me, like, what would you say to that doctor? And I'm like, I don't even know. I don't even know. What is there to say? Like, that hurt my feelings. Like, obviously, he knew it wasn't a nice thing. Do you say, how dare you? Like, he was telling the truth, And it's just one of those other downsides of like being fat in the medical world and just never being taken seriously. No one ever came to my room and said, "You've had a stroke. Here's what happened. Here's what to avoid. Don't eat these foods." Like, I did all of that research on my own as soon as I got home because after being treated like that, I was pretty much done. I didn't even want to ask questions at that point because I'm not a person to you. I'm in the way of a bed that you need for someone that you will treat like a person.
That's terrible. Do you think part of it was just that the hospital was under siege, basically, with
Oh, absolutely. I definitely think that, our medical professionals in every capacity are just completely overwhelmed since COVID started. And I have a huge amount of empathy and respect for them. But at the same time, you're delivering life altering news. And,
no, yeah, it doesn't excuse it. I'm just wondering the context of
oh, yeah, definitely.
what the hospital was like at that moment when they said that.
Oh, it was absolute chaos. I was actually transported from another hospital down to that particular one that I was discharged from. And I thought that everything was going fine up until that third day. It wasn't until the second day that my husband was able to come up there and I could have guests. And he just had absolute like terror on his face. He was ghost white. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he's just like, "I'm just so glad to see you." And I'm thinking like, "I just saw you yesterday." And he's like, "No, you don't understand. They told me you died." And I'm like,
Jeez.
"Well, I didn't die." And like, how do you it was horrible. I've never seen my husband's face look like that. Even in all the times that I have been sick and battled other illnesses, or even when our 4-year-old was downtown on a ventilator, like I've never seen that amount of worry in his face too many times. And that, I mean, it was very disorganized. It was very, um, I guess, under siege is definitely like the best terminology for it. They definitely had like more patients than staff, and that's always a really bad spot for a hospital to be. Every other person was fantastic. All the med students and the nurses and everybody were amazing. But I think that one moment with that one doctor really just it definitely lit a fire under my ass. I'll say that.
So yeah, take me through when the dust settled a little bit and you kind of started to get your head around what had happened. What describe your physical condition at that point in I'm going to give you some bullet points. I need to
Sure.
know the physical condition, just mobility wise, because I think you had mentioned that that was extraordinarily poor.
Yeah.
Your how where you were at in your recovery from COVID, and where you were at in your recovery from the stroke, and how what was the general physical outlook as the year sort of turned into January.
John, it was grim. It was it wasn't looking good. One of the reasons I think that they had told my husband that I had died is because whoever was next to me was also very similar, like body wise, very overweight, pretty young, but bad health. And so when they were relaying that information from the ambulance to the hospital that we were both transferred to, I guess that's kind of where those wires were crossed. And so, I did have to look at him and be like, well, the good news is I'm not dead. The bad news is I had a stroke because, like I said, he wasn't able to visit me and be up there for that. And all the questions that he asked out loud were like things that I also had struggled with, but hearing my partner say them just made them that much more real and more scary. Because he's like, "Well, you're only 31," and I'm like, "Can't tell me about it." But having COVID multiple times obviously didn't help. But I can't blame 100% of it on that either. I feel like if it hadn't been that, I mean, I was a walking heart attack even before COVID was a thing. So it didn't help me any, but I can't blame it all on that. The prognosis when I left the hospital was pretty terrible. I wasn't able to walk. I could stand, but my strength wasn't equal on each side. Couldn't use my right side at all. And even if you look back at some of those older videos, when I'm talking, my right side of my face is drooping. And so physically, it wasn't a good outlook, especially for as young as I am. And it didn't help that like everywhere that I went, like I would call around to find different providers that were in network for me. And I would say, I need to find a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. Do you take such and such insurance? And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Give us your information. What's your first and last name? How old are you? And I would say 31. And they're like, oh, 81. I'm like, 31. And they're like, oh, wow. So just kind of reinforcing everything I was already shaming myself for and beating myself up about. But within 6 weeks, I was able to walk again normally. Within about 4 months, I earned back all of my movement in my right hand and right arm, which were my biggest struggles. I
Wow.
gained my gross motor skills back pretty quickly, but those fine motor skills of like typing, writing, braiding my kids' hair, like just things that you take for granted every day, those are the things that I really struggled with losing.
So take me through the sort of inner transition as you were trying to figure out what to make of all this and where to go from there.
Sure. For me, it happened in the middle of the school year, so right over Christmas break. Every morning when I'm getting my daughters ready, I make them like face the mirror while I'm brushing their hair and braiding it and everything, and I tell them to say nice things about themselves. And when they were younger, I'd have to kind of guide them through it. I'm kind, I'm smart, I'm funny, I'm a good friend, things like that. But now that they're older, they've really starting to take over ownership of that and just innately say those things to themselves. And that was something that was really important to me as a parent and as a woman because I didn't grow up feeling that way or being taught that. And for me, it was, I vividly remember braiding my younger daughter's hair and like catching myself in the mirror while she was doing this and feeling like I could never say that stuff to myself. Why am I making her do it? And almost kind of that like imposter syndrome feeling. So I, I waited for them to get on the school bus and I stood in the mirror and I just like stared myself down for a good 5 to 6 minutes. And finally it was just like, I like your eyes. And that was the only nice thing that I could think of to say to myself. And I went back the second day and I made myself say two things. I went back the third day, I made myself say three things. And eventually it became as natural for me as I had made it become for them. And
Baby steps
now,
for the win.
yeah. And I'm a big fan of fake it till you make it because every single like confident person I know, every single person that I've worked with as far as like events and like that has any type of like following or just presence in general, they all say the same thing like, oh, I'm not confident, but I convince people that I'm confident and now I'm confident. So, and that always kind of threw me for a loop because I'm like, well, either you are or you aren't. And now I get it because it's like, I'm not confident 24/7, but I can be confident enough when I need to be now that I've taught myself how. That turning point for me was really just being able to say nice things to myself. And I'm not going to cry um, because I realized I was 31 before I could ever say anything kind to myself. I would parrot all of those ugly things that I would hear. I was always really chubby growing up. I was always really awkward. I was so much taller than my peers that my feet were huge and I would like trip all over myself. And so I would just repeat to myself, you're big, you're clunky, you're clumsy. Nobody wants you around um, my entire life. And so
Whose voice was it? Was it always your voice that kind of carried through the years, or were there some key? Yeah, you're smiling. You have an answer for this one.
Um, if I'm being totally honest, 90% of the time, the voice was my mother, which is something that I'm still trying to work through to this day. It's not easy to admit that out loud, especially as a mom. The last thing I ever want to imagine is like hurting my daughters in a way that hurts them today, but let alone 30 years from now. But coming to the realization that she also grew up chubby in the 60s and 70s. She also felt undesirable. She also felt unattractive. She also felt unworthy. So she was doing the best that she could with what she had. Um, and so I appreciate so much of what she did, but also things like putting me on a diet at 8, telling me that I was fat, no one would love me. Those things really do damage. Um,
Yeah, I don't know if that classifies as doing your best with what you have.
I
Um,
think I think parenting is so different from what it used to be. Um, and I think if she'd had better influences in her life growing up, she probably would have recognized some of the unhealthy things that she was doing. So I don't blame her entirely. And it's not her saying those things every single day to me. It's her saying it once in passing when I'm 8 or 15 or 21, and me repeating them every day. So I do feel like, um, yes, she absolutely, the onus is on her to not say those things. But I definitely, there's things that I've said in the last week to probably my spouse or a sibling that I wouldn't want them repeating mentally, for 20 plus years. And to me, it would have just been something small in that moment. Like, oh my God, if I tell my husband one more time to get his shoes out of the floor, I don't want him playing that over and over. But I do also feel like I would never say something to my children or my spouse or my siblings or anyone that I care about that plays on their deepest fears and
yeah,
like regrets. And I feel like that's one thing she did feel me at. She knew I was already getting teased at school. Why bully me at home? She knew that I didn't feel attractive or pretty, um, given that the area that we lived in was like predominantly white, and I'm one of the only biracial kids that I knew until high school. Um, saying things about my hair when it's already, people are throwing spitballs at it at lunch didn't really help. Um, I do think a lot of it is being a product of a different time, but a lot of it is also just hurt people. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so adamant about healing yourself before trying to fix yourself. You can do all the workouts in the world, and if you're not working on your mental like health and the inside stuff, you definitely were one of the people that kind of drove that home for me because, I remember seeing one of your videos about like, I think you're just sitting in a car and you're like, I've lost all this weight. I'm helping people. Like I know that I'm doing good things. Why do I feel so like blah? And I was like, man, if this person with all these followers and this platform and this huge success story can feel this way, like then it's probably pretty normal that I feel this way. So
yeah. I
thank you for
believe I
being
said I
vulnerable.
felt like dog shit and I wanted to die.
I didn't know what else I could say here, but yes, that's the one.
I'll go ahead and click the explicit button on this podcast. Whatever.
That is
You can
exactly
speak
the
frankly.
one. Because yeah, there's times where I've got everything that I ever prayed for. I was a single parent for a really long time after my daughter's father left in the midst of me being the absolute sickest I'd ever been. And that did a lot of damage to me because I felt like if the man who got down on one knee and asked me to spend forever with him decided that my health issues are too much, then I'm just going to be alone forever because a lot of those things are not going away. I was sick before I had COVID. I had a horrible immune system before I ever had COVID. I was always in and out of different hospitals and things for some of the issues that I had. And I just remember thinking, like, he asked me to be his wife. He asked me to be by his side. And and then he left. So what does that say about me? What does that say about who I am? And I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be here after that. There was some. Another reason I smiled when you asked whose voice I was hearing is because a lot of it was his as well. We'd spent 6 years together, and what ultimately ended the marriage was I've got epilepsy, which is a seizure disorder, and we'd had a small argument. He went to bed. I was like, I'm gonna go cool off and take a shower. And in the shower, I had a seizure, and the wash rag covered the drain. So I end up face down in about 8 inches of standing
Oh,
water for we don't even know how
jeez.
long. He pulls me out, resuscitates me, and then calls his mistress before calling 911. And I didn't know about her until later. Um, Never visited in the hospital. And then when I finally came to 3 days later, still coughing up water, still like feeling like I'm drowning because I'd taken in so much,
Jeez.
he finally just looks at me and he's like, "What do you want from me? Like, I could have let you drown." And I hear that in my brain at least once a month. It's not as bad anymore. We've been separated, and divorced for a very long time now. But on my worst days, I'm just like, "Oh God, he should have just let me drown." And I know that that's not how I feel. I know that that's not what I really want. I know that that is my mind playing tricks on me with my deepest fears, my deepest insecurities. And that's what bothers me about people saying things in passing because what's 3 seconds for you is a lifetime for someone else. You never know.
Yeah, one thing I have a lot of success with in one-to-one coaching is helping people, work through these really traumatic events. And you've had your fair share. That's definitely fair to say. And I think you're the living embodiment of the fact that the physical weight we carry is usually a fraction of the mental and emotional weight we're carrying. And so I would just encourage you to, you have a lot of the hallmarks of someone who, in how you think back about the doctor and you don't know what you would say to that person. And you don't really know exactly how to feel about the things your mom said. And you half agree with your ex-husband at times, and you half know that it was a terrible thing to say to someone,
Right.
especially when they're in a hospital bed and you're, basically piecing out on them. But I think it will be very helpful for you to realize that your mind is not playing tricks on you. And one of the things you can do as you continue in your progress, you started off by being willing to take baby steps of kindness toward yourself. And maybe in the next phase you can start to validate these feelings a little bit more so that you can fully feel them and process them and heal them eventually.
You're definitely right. I'm definitely like a don't think about it until I have to think about it kind of person. And I've noticed the more that I get physically fit, the more I'm like, why am I sitting in my car crying to this song from like 12 years ago? And then I'm like, oh yeah, this reminds me of that night in college where such and such happened. And I'm like, I didn't even know that I was still upset about that. I didn't know I was still mad at that old roommate from 2009. I didn't know that I was still hurt by that guy that ghosted me in 2014. Like, it's you're absolutely right. It's piecing together all the parts of you to make you healthy again because everything that you're carrying weight wise is just a fraction, like you said, of everything that you're carrying mentally. I fully believe that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the things that are the deepest, most thorny memories and things that we haven't processed yet, we're so good at keeping them kind of locked in the the one room of the house we don't go in.
Right.
It's like when the beast tells Bill, like, don't go in the west wing. It's
Yes.
like, that's where I keep all the bodies. Turns out it was like a library or something, which
I don't know if you
is way
ever
less
watched Friends,
metal.
but I'm obsessed with it. And Monica Geller is the character that's like obsessed with being clean. Everyone knows her to be this like germaphobe. She's always cleaning, always organized, and she's got this one closet in her apartment that they discover one day is like just filled with crap. And she's so
Yeah.
ashamed when they find out, and she's like just mortified. And I'm like, if everyone knew that I've got this like little closet in my mind, that I just put all my crap in, like my whole life, my whole identity would just come crumbling. I don't know what I would do, but
Yeah.
at the
And it's
same time,
often
like
like, sorry, there's just a little bit of a lag. That's why I
you're
don't
fine.
mean to talk over you. Yeah, it's like that. It starts out as like a junk drawer, and then it becomes like a wheelie bin, and then it becomes like a closet, and then
Yep.
it just spreads and spreads, and pretty much by the end, you're huddled in one corner of the living room, and the entirety of your house is, it just you look like you're on the Hoarders, the reality TV show, and
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of it. This is why I teach that awareness is, the key to change, because one of the ways that awareness helps us change is that it allows us to be present to the things that need to be moved. In some senses, our brain doesn't actually get rid of them; it just processes them and kind of takes them out of our body and puts them into long-term brain storage in our frontal
Right.
cortex, which is usually what's supposed to happen. And I think this is one of the reasons why people end up in very big bodies, is because the body is literally trying to make more room and more neural connections to so that the brain can offload things that it hasn't been able to process. Science will tell, but I'll put $20 on that for sure. That paper is going to come out in the next 20 years for sure.
I definitely agree.
But
I definitely agree.
yeah, and that's apart from the emotional reasons. There's obviously inputs. The weight doesn't get on there without us doing bad things to donuts and pizza.
Right.
Definitely behaviors, but yeah, the emotional side is so huge, and I think one of the biggest things that people, even in a life or death context, and this is why I don't like people to get a diagnosis from the doctor and then use that as their sole motivation, because it's still kind of a negative motivation. It's just you're evoking fight or flight to move you toward health, but you're still, by evoking fight or flight, you're staying in that place where
Right.
you're always on the hind foot with that, because as soon as it decides to steer left, you don't have control because you're in fight or flight. And um, really, awareness allows us to see, okay, I have a house full of stuff. I don't know what to do with it. And the reason Monica didn't deal with the closet is because of the shame she has about the closet. And so it's this self fulfilling prophecy. And I also teach that shame is not a result of our compulsive behaviors, it's a key component of what keeps them in place. Because shame's job is not to make us feel bad. Shame's job is to keep us from being aware of what's going on. Because if we were
Right.
fully aware and willing to open the closet and sit there, we would pick up the easiest thing and we'd walk it to the door, or we'd take it to Goodwill or give it to a friend. And then we'd come back and do the same thing the next day. We'd baby step that stuff. So let's go back to the early winter. I guess it was early winter. When did you decide to make a change and to try, I'm assuming for the 50,000th time, to lose weight? I'm just,
Yeah.
as a total guess. But if you're anything like everyone else. Oh, another question. Had
Yeah.
you ever lost more than 50 pounds in your life?
Yes. Yes, I had.
Okay. Again,
Probably five, six
checkbox.
times now. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's like I think that's another reason that I ended up getting up to the weight that I did. To answer your other question, I came home on New Year's Day in that afternoon from the hospital after having this stroke, and my husband and my dad picked me up, and I was embarrassed to even tell them what had happened. Like, all they knew was that I had to have imaging done and that it was something neurological since I couldn't walk and couldn't speak properly. Um, but the doctor delivered that news to me in such a shameful way, or a way that I took shamefully, that I didn't even want to tell them what was wrong with me. And I was like, oh, I'm fine. I just can't walk. I'm fine. I just can't, move one side of my face. Not big.
Mhm.
And so really just sitting with that feeling like all day on New Year's, um, it just weighed heavier and heavier on me. And every year on New Year's, I do what's called intercessory prayer, which is basically, I don't know how you
Oh
grew
yeah.
up, but I'm very religious. And so every year on New Year's, I just spend like the whole day just, um, like my kind of thought process is like, if you're thinking about praying, then you better be praying. So I just spent the whole day like, Lord, I don't want to be like this forever. I've done it before. I know I can do it again, but I
Mm.
don't want to ever have to do it again after this. This is the last time. For real. Pinky promise, God. Like, if you'll just help me not feel like this, if you'll help me walk again, if you'll help me talk again, I will use every bone in my body to glorify you and just get back to normal. And it's vanity at some point too, because like that's not what he's for. I'm not number one on his checklist. He's got plenty of other big things going on, but at that point I was just like, it would take divine intervention for me to ever be successful, was my thought process. And it has, and I do absolutely give all credit where it's due, but a lot of it is just working. And that for me was like, I don't know if you've ever like struggled with substance abuse or know anyone that has, but it's like just that step of acceptance where you're just bargaining, where I'm just like, God, just, if you just let me be skinny, God, I will go on all the missions. I will do all the things. And then just realizing like that was probably the most ridiculous thing I could have ever prayed for. Why would I pray for that when I could just get up and take a walk? Um, and so just during that whole day of New Year's, just praying about like different things and what I wanted for my life and my family, and what I wanted everything as a whole to come together to look like. I knew that I could not be in that body to have the life that I wanted. I knew that, like, even just outside of being morbidly obese at that point, I couldn't walk. And so to pray about, like, I hope that one day we've got the funds to take the kids to Disney World, like, girlfriend, like, priorities. um, maybe you need legs for that. And just kind of like, it really drove home for me how desperate I was, but how complacent I had been. Are you really desperate if you're not doing anything? Are you really unhappy if you're just sitting in it? Are you really that ready to change if it's your 50th, 60th time? And just really having to confront myself and realize like I'm probably not as I'm not as motivated to change as I think that I am, but this time I really am. And so just having that experience with the hospital, knowing that, I mean, I got married at, I think, 338 pounds, and that was November of 2020. So in a little, a little over a year, barely 13 months, I made it up to 422. That's insane. Most people don't hit 300 pounds in their life, let alone 350, 400. And I did it in a year. That's a lot. And I really had to address like, okay, what's been going on the last year? Because as far as I knew, I was happy. I was a newlywed. My family looked the way that I wanted it to look, um, or did it? You know what I mean? It's like you really have to confront everything. Leave no stone unturned, because after
Mhm.
a while of thinking, like, well, okay, yeah, I am a newlywed, so I knew that there were going to be like date nights and cutesy things and anniversary cake, but then there were also a lot of like there was a lot of loneliness in that first year, because it was like, okay, I'm not a single parent anymore, and I can't just go like, my dad's my best friend in the world. My husband knows this. I can't just like pop over and bug my dad whenever I want now, because like I'm not his single adult child. I am someone's wife, and like I should probably be home at night. I can't just stuff away those feelings in the closet of like co-parenting with someone who's done like irreparable emotional damage to me, but also like I don't disparage him, and I certainly would never in front of my kids or anything. Like, how do you confront those feelings without vocalizing what someone's done to you, or like how that makes you feel? I'm just feeling really guilty about that. Learning to like confront my mom when she says things like in the moment, so that I know that I'm not gonna lose sleep over it for the next 10 years because that's just who the person I am, or I've wired myself to be, I guess. Um, but for me, it was just taking like a unfiltered, like unadulterated inventory of everything that had happened in that first year of my marriage and being like, okay, well, family life was great. Marriage was great. But here's all the other things that were going on. Also, there's a pandemic. Also, I had to see my 4-year-old on a ventilator. That was pretty awful.
Hmm.
And then realizing, like, there's a lot of things that I put in my Monica closet for a year. And if I don't deal with them now, I'm going to have a Monica house. And I didn't want that for myself.
Yeah. And then you have the Monica closet is really just a doorway. It's just a foyer to the
Right.
storage room that's holding all the other stuff from
Yes, I
childhood
didn't
and
want my Monica closet to turn into like a hoarder's home. So I was
yes.
like, I really have to deal with these things. And a lot of that is like, I have the freedom to do so now that I'm married again. Functioning as a single parent, you don't have anyone to tell all those things to.
Mhm.
And even the few people that I did have in my life were also other single parents. So I'm not going to call someone else up and be like, hey, I'd like to talk about my baby daddy, if that's all right with you, because she's got her own. Finally, just realizing like, I'm gonna have to deal with some awful things that were said to me. I'm gonna have to deal with like some things that I wish I hadn't done, or things I wish I hadn't eaten, or habits I wish I hadn't picked up, because I was I had already conditioned myself to like, okay, we're going to move 30 minutes every day. The second I got home from the hospital, and they were like, it's okay if you can't do anything for 6 weeks. I was like, no, I'll start with seated workouts. And my first seated workout was on January 3rd. The day that I was able to walk from my bed to my couch was the first day that I worked out. And that's also, if you
Mm.
look back on my page, that's the same day that I did those like before videos. And my form is crap. My workout was like 4 minutes long, but I just remember thinking like, I don't have any excuses. Um, and actually, if anything, I had all the excuses in the world. I'd had COVID. I'd had a stroke. I had no way to move half of my body. You know, all things considered, if I had said I don't want to work out today, everyone in my life would have probably been like, "That's fair," you know. But
Hmm.
I knew if I spend one more day making excuses or giving into these excuses that I have that are legitimate, I'm never going to change. And
Yeah, we often get to a point where, I have clients who deal with a lot of hypochondria, because that's going to happen when you are north of 400 pounds.
mhm,
And I even did a couple TikToks on it, but I don't think many people saw them. But it's very important for people when they're up against those fears. I'm not saying to completely disregard your medical issues. That's not what I'm saying. But when a fear is saying, "Oh, well, you've got these issues, so don't do anything," it's like, well, is that really trying to get you healthy, or is it just
right,
trying to keep everything the same?
right,
And for me, when I would have those, I would just say, "Fine. If okay, if I'm gonna have a heart attack, fine. I'm going down swinging. I'm going down walking. I'm going down at the gym." So that's a very real thing to be pushed to the edge in that way, that certain things become clear to you. That it's really tragic that sometimes we have to be pushed to that crazy of a place to be able to connect with like an innate motivation that is ours
right,
and a permission to actually put ourselves first, because you're literally at the cliff edge and you're like, the voice telling me to take a step backward, like, it's that's what shows you, oh, this voice doesn't have my best interests at heart, even though
right.
it's really good at tricking me into thinking that it does.
You're so right. And for me, it was realizing that, like, yeah, I do have all these valid reasons to not want to work out today. Like, all these things are stacked against me. But that is exactly the reason why I have to work out today. And I remember my husband being like, no, 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 just stay in bed. Like, you're fine. Like, let's get you some medicine. Let's get you comfortable. And he's like fluffing pillows, like pulling out my favorite blankie. Like, no, 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 just relax, please. And I'm just like, I have to do this. And I have to do this now. I don't want to die like this. I
Mm.
don't, I'm laughing because it's ridiculous, but my biggest fear is that I'm going to die like really suddenly before I lose all the weight. And it's going to take like way too many relatives to be my pallbearers. And I know that that's like a ridiculous thing to think, but I'm just like, if I, if I kick the bucket today, it's going to take like, I've got some pretty strong like uncles, brothers, cousins, but it's going to take a lot of them. So I'm like, I can't die till I'm skinny. Not necessarily skinny, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Like, I'm not going out like
six
this.
squares or less. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going out like
I
this.
get it. It's great. It's great that you can be that honest because like I've had a very dark life, and so a dark sense of humor comes along with that. So
Same.
that's completely valid. But no, that's how real it is. And I don't get it very often, but when people accuse me of being fat phobic, I'm just like, that's the kind of stuff that I think of. People like you who are like, well, the chances of me making it to my goal, like I'm not even thinking about goal weight. I'm thinking about like how ashamed do I have to be when
Right.
it ends up bad? And it's such a prison, and it's so horrible. And to think that there's an amount of fat acceptance that is the solution there. It's like, no, something's got to change, and
Yeah.
you changed it. I'm really curious
Thank
to
you.
know what what did your sort of last 6 months look like? How did things progress? How did the weight come off?
Great question. I knew this was going to come up, and I feel like I give the most boring answer ever. I had to confront my binge eating and my portion sizes because that's where I struggle the most. Coming from an athletic background, even while I was recovering from the stroke, um, my my weakest point for myself was still much stronger than what most of my PT and OT specialists saw as like a baseline because my body had already carried so much weight. That's actually one of the things that really like motivated me in the beginning. And one of your very first videos that I saw that I was like, this dude's amazing. You actually said probably like late January, early February, you're
Yeah,
like,
you're an
if you're
athlete.
carrying this kind of weight, you're an athlete. You're already an athlete. And I remember like sitting on that for a moment. I'm like, there's nothing athletic about me. I remember doing two-a-days and working out for 4 hours at a time in high school. I was an athlete then, but now like I'm just a mom and I'm overweight and I eat like crap and I feel like crap. And then the more I thought about it, I'm actually like having a debate with my dad like across the dining room table like a couple days later after seeing this video, and he's like, well, and he's a former military, and he's like, well, he's like, let's say the average Marine is like between 180 and 220, so like 200 average, right? They're going to slap a vest and a backpack and everything that equals 120, 150 pounds on their back and train them for months at a time to get them to their peak physical condition. That's 350 pounds. You're already doing that every day. You're an athlete. And I'm like, this guy's definitely onto something. And ever
Go
since
dad.
then, yeah, definitely. And I think you also brought up like fat acceptance, and I fully push for that too. But I think realizing like what we're actually capable of is more important than anything, um, because a lot of us don't even know that we're athletes or don't even realize that we're still athletes, um, and that for me was just this huge like mindset shift. The only thing that I really did the first, I would say, 2 months, I mean, I had to start with seated workouts for the first, I'd say, probably 6 weeks. They weren't trendy, it wasn't Jillian Michaels,
Yeah.
Booty Blaster 3000, anything crazy like that. And people are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's really the most boring thing ever. I eat less, I move more. And I know it's like the most
Hmm.
frustrating thing because I would a year ago I was following everyone I could on Instagram or TikTok to find like the magic thing, the the not even a quick fix. I was so desperate for just whatever I could find that I was consuming all the wrong things. Lauren Geraldo is an absolute genius, but she's also like 5'5" and like 118 pounds. That's not I am not her target audience. So even though she's very knowledgeable, I can't follow those workouts and get those results. I'm not going to be able to do like the Ab Master 6,000 and the buns and thighs tapes. Like I'm just not.
Hmm.
That's not my niche market, and I'm not
Yeah.
theirs. Realizing that like you have to work out differently when you have a bigger body was probably the biggest difficulty for me, because you want to be able to do like the cutesy trends and the challenges, and it's not meant for you. Like, it's not sustainable, and it's not realistic. My knees
Yeah,
at my
and
absolute highest were not going to complete like P90X or Insanity or anything. I had before, but at this weight, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
yeah, I think it's amazing that, again, you did it partially because there was literally no other option, but you took the next step, and you
Yeah.
didn't let any of the obstacles block you off from what you could do. And this is the easy way out, embodied. It's not that there's no effort, it's that it is the path of least resistance. And
Yes.
you finally gave yourself permission to do that. And all of a sudden, these little workouts saying you have pretty eyes in the mirror, pretty soon it can be a huge change, not only to your habits, but more importantly to your mindset.
That's going to do it for part 1 of my interview with Shae McDonald. You can catch part 2 in the next episode, which should come out in a week's time. Shae is an incredible person, and she has an incredible story. And I want every single person who has more than 50 pounds to lose to listen to her story and to see that you don't have to get pushed into a life or death corner to finally give yourself permission to put yourself first and prioritize the changes that you truly want to make. This isn't about forcing anybody to do anything they don't want or convincing yourself to do something. It's really about permission. I absolutely loved her reference to the Monica closet. That's going to be a new thing. You'll hear from time to time, the Monica closet. That's one step down from the full hoarder house. So please share this podcast with anybody who you think could benefit from hearing it. If you think someone needs to hear this podcast, they definitely do. And if they really need to hear it, then it's not worth worrying about offending someone or hurting their feelings. Like, they know the situation they're in, and this is actually going to be a ray of hope. Definitely follow Shae on TikTok at Shae Shows Up. That's ShaeShowsup. Shae spelled SHAE shows up. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe on your platform of choice. Hit the plus icon on Apple Podcasts. I'm not really sure what you do on Spotify, but it should be pretty obvious. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel and watch these interviews in video form, along with the other content that I post to YouTube. You can join our Facebook group for community support and getting answers to your burning questions. That's Lose Weight with John. Obviously, you can follow me on TikTok, which you probably do already if you're listening to this, but in case you're not, I'm at Fat Loss Coach. If you're really ready to lose weight and you're sick of going it alone and just staying on that hamster wheel of failure, I do have openings for direct one-to-one work. And if you'd like to inquire about that, you can email me at John, John, at oaksweightloss.com. That's Oaks with an E, Oakes. All of these can be found in the links below. Be sure to subscribe so you'll get part 2 when it drops in a week, I believe next Monday or Tuesday. And please take a few seconds to rate the podcast, 5 stars, kind words. That stuff is really important when you're getting a podcast off the ground. Oh, and one last note. I've noticed that for some reason I've been having sound issues. I sound like I'm inside of a tin can. I don't know what's going on. I stole my buddy's, nice Yeti mic. I don't know what the issue is. It's probably settings or something, or maybe I bumped something. God knows what. If you're a sound expert and you want to give me some tips, much appreciated. Bring it my way. Hopefully we'll get those sound issues ironed out. We'll keep up in the production values on this show because I don't think we're going anywhere. I think this has been long overdue, and I don't see any reason to stop because I'm having a blast so far, and this is a great new way to reach people in this longer format. All right, well, that's all for now. And until we meet again, keep taking the easy way out.